then it becomes a fight, and the owner's caught in the middle. And so all that to say, when I was working for GC, you're on that side of the table, and you're kind of...
You're seeing all that.
Yeah, and so you're quick to blame the architect. Prior to that, I was always in the architectural office, and it was vice versa.
Always, yeah.
So
Yeah. So, yeah, welcome to episode 3 of Architecture Distilled. We're sitting here with Omar, and yeah, we're going to just sit down and have a conversation about some architecture and future stuff. And
sure, I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Omar, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just give us a little bit of background.
Sure. Like a lot of the architects in this general area, I went to UTA. I'll start with college days. I'll make it very brief because I know we don't have too much time. Did my undergrad studies there, started grad school, met my would-be wife. We got pregnant. That put an end to grad school.
Tends to do that.
Never went back. Started working and got my first job out of college at Carter & Burgess when it was still Carter & Burgess. That was in the late 90s, probably 98-ish. Worked there for a couple years. Left there to hook up with a firm called RHA in Dallas. Did a lot of retail, big box retail all over the country. Spent the better part of 10 years there. And then I kind of, I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial spirit, so it was always my intent to, when the time was right and I thought I cut my teeth and paid my dues and was ready, I would go out on my own. So I did that. I think I opened up my practice and one-man show. I want to say it was March or April. Let's call it for end of first quarter of 2007. And as we all know, what happened by the end of 2007.
That was a perfect timing.
Great timing.
Timing was horrendous. And then, nobody at the time knew how long the recession would last. And then, it lasted years, obviously. And when I started kind of seeing the writing on the wall and knew that things were going to get a little lean, of course, I went to try to go out and find a job. But of course, nobody was hiring. Everybody was laying off, and you was lucky to keep your job. And so I managed to keep the lights turned on just barely, for about 4 or 5 years until we started pulling out of the recession. And at that time, after 4 or 5 years of barely keeping my head above water, the first time that I got a good job offer, coming my way, I jumped all over it. And, the idea of going back to an office Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, getting a paycheck every 2 weeks sounded pretty good.
Yeah.
After 5 years of just barely hustling every job I could get. And when I was doing my own thing, it was a design build practice, so the idea was I was going to, have we'll call it an arm of the practice that did the architectural, but also I wanted to be able to perform the construction services as well.
That's interesting.
Because I've always had a love for construction, and I've always been somewhat adjacent to it, during my late teens and early 20s, late high school, and my summer jobs during college. I worked, residential construction, built houses. That was kind of the the agreement we made with my dad. We being me and my brothers. My dad did pretty well monetarily, so we were comfortable enough that he could send us all to college, and we didn't have to work and didn't have to take out loans. He was able to foot the bill, but the agreement was, I don't want you guys going to summer school. I think you need the summers off to give yourself a little break from school, number one. And number two, when summer comes around, you're on your own. I'm not paying any bills for you. You got to get a job, and you got to learn how it is to. So let me take half a step back. So my dad's policy was none of us had an option to go to college. We all had to go to college. That was the mandate. And then to make things a little more interesting, he again. My dad was born in the 40s, that generation. And his thought process was that not only do we all have to go to college, we have to go away to college. We can't go to college close to home. I was raised in the Boulder, Colorado area. And so right And when I mean right after, I mean like within 2 weeks after I graduated high school, my mom and dad relocated to Texas because we're all from Texas. I was born here. My folks were born here. We moved to Boulder when I was 6 years old. All my formative years were spent there. Graduated high school there. And then, like I said, 2 weeks after I graduated high school, my mom and dad relocated to the Dallas area. And so I stayed behind and went to Colorado State. And my other brothers went to UT and Iowa State. So everybody was away from home kind of deal. So you can't come home on the weekends and get your laundry done and your mom cook your meals for you, that kind of thing, right? So anyhow, going back to what I was saying, that was a deal. We were on our own during college, and we had to, the summers during college, and we had to pay our own way and make our own way, and having a desire to practice architecture and liking the process of seeing things be erected and built and from paper to completion. I thought that some sort of construction job would be beneficial during college. It would pay the bills, number one, and it would actually teach me how things were actually done in the field as opposed to behind a drafting table. Back then we didn't have we had UTA had a computer studio that was about that big. Everything was drafting, hand drafting, board drafting. Wow. And so did that. That's where I kind of got exposed to construction. Again, graduated from UT Arlington, got my first job at Carter and Burgess, graduated to RHA, spent about 10 years there, opened my practice, like I said, and then the recession, when the recession started to peter out and things started to pick up again, a good friend of mine was the COO of a general contracting company in Dallas. And so he approached me and they were trying to build a design build arm of the practice because they were just GCs, and they did a lot of publicly funded work. Whether it's state government, local school districts, federal government, i.e., military bases, that kind of stuff. All they did was publicly funded work, and so. He said, "Yeah, we're trying to get some design build going. We need someone to handle the design because they were just construction guys, construction managers." So they approached me to come on board there. Came to an agreement. I went to work for them for about a year and a half. So I actually did work for a general contractor, and then they started struggling financially. And of course, my buddy, being their COO, knew exactly not COO, CFO, their corporate financial officer. So he had firsthand knowledge of how the company was performing financially, and he kind of pulled me aside and said, "Hey, man, I know I'm the CFO of the company, but I'm also your buddy, and I brought you on board, and we're not doing very well." So the idea was that they had all this work in the pipeline, design build stuff that they wanted me to handle the architecture on, and that's how it was proposed to me when I accepted the position. Truth be told, it wasn't exactly that. It was.
Is it ever?
Yeah, exactly right. They had a bunch of lines in the water, and they thought that they were going to get all this work, and they didn't get most of it. Now, the way it was presented to me is, we already have this work. We just need someone to perform it. So there was a little bit of
bait and switch there.
Miscommunication, we'll call it, to be politically correct.
Or everybody was kind of hoping that it was here, but it really wasn't there. It
didn't pan out. And so he told me that, hey, you make a pretty nice salary, number one, and number two, you've been here the shortest amount of time. You're going to be the first one to go. So if I were you, I would start, putting feelers out. That was probably, when was that? 13-ish, 12, 13-ish. And that's how I ended up at Hodges Architecture, where I met this fine gentleman right here. And I spent about 10 years with Hodges working with these two fellows right here. When I came on board, they needed, at the time I hadn't started doing construction admin yet. I was, PMing when I was still working for RHA. I was a PM. And then when, the recruiter put me with Hodges, they needed immediate help in their construction admin department. Of course, that was coming from a GC, so it was a good fit. But I did have to explain to them, having never done this before, there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. As it turned out, it wasn't a big deal. But when I was on board, they kind of created a hybrid position for me in that it was, again, they needed immediate help in CA, but, I was a PM, so they kind of created a small hybrid role, if you want to call it that, where I was, initially PMing and GCing my own projects. And they were small, multi-tenant shell retail projects that, I could do both. Of course, we didn't do design. As you guys know, we had a design team. I did all the production, and then when it became a construction project, I did all CA, and that's kind of how I learned the ins and outs of CA. And I'd say within the first year, certainly within the 2 years, that kind of hybrid position kind of just went away. And I was, strictly doing CA from that point on.
Yeah.
And then at some point, maybe
we were super busy then. Yeah.
I was doing entertainment. When entertainment started to slow down a little bit, and we lost a big client, Main Event, as you guys know. We started kicking off Hodges Living, which was Hodges's multifamily, product, which you guys, were
that's where we started working together.
Yeah.
And so one thing led to another. I slowly morphed into the full-time CA guy for the multifamily team, and that's why I work with these guys literally every day for the better part of 4 or 5 years. And then from that point on, along the way, we've all left Hodges, and I've started doing other things. But that's how I got to know these guys, and we did a lot of good work together and worked very well together, and we're still doing stuff together.
Still trying. Yeah.
So you asked me a little bit about myself, and there you go.
Yeah. So that construction company that you worked for, did that help you kind of set up for the construction administration role at Hodges?
Yeah, certainly it did. Now, it was certainly not an apples to apples comparison, but at least I was in and around a construction company, a GC firm.
Yeah.
And when I would go out in the field, it was a completely different set of things I was looking for, being on the GC side as opposed to the architect side. But at the same time, you're still out in the same,
you see the same things, which you mentioned on this.
But you're looking at, it was interesting actually because, you may or may, if you don't know it like firsthand, then you can certainly appreciate the fact that let's just say generic construction project, nothing ever goes 100% smooth, right?
No.
Ever.
Ever.
And inevitably, this is really, really generic speak, but when something goes south, and especially if it's a big deal, if it's a small deal, GC, architects, engineers, owner, et cetera, everybody works it out. But if it's something that's going to cost us some real money, the way it always pans out is the architect is quick to blame the GC for not doing it right, or hey, you should have done this. GC wants to blame the architect. Hey, your drawings weren't good enough.
Yeah.
These specs aren't complete, et cetera, et cetera. Or even if it's an MEP thing or a structural, they're under the architect's
there's always something
contract. So then it becomes a fight, and the owner's caught in the middle. And so all that to say, when I was working for GC, you're on that side of the table, and you're
seeing all that.
Yeah, and so you're quick to blame the architect. Prior to that, I was always in the architectural office, and it was vice versa. So it was interesting to see how that worked. There wasn't a lot of that because again, I was only there for about a year and a half. But being there for a year and a half, you do see some stuff.
Yeah,
and it was a bit of a
learning
experience.
I saw that a lot with you, working alongside you, especially on the multifamily projects that we worked together on. Yeah. Like I saw that you were very open to work with the GCs and not quick to try to
I like to be like that too. I mean,
I saw that a lot with you.
I wondered if it came across because I think some of our personnel, thought that I should be, a lot more.
Oh, I know our employer thought that.
Yeah,
he tried to make every GC the enemy.
Exactly, and that just never works, man.
No,
I didn't like that. Not that I'm humble or anything, but I understand that I don't know everything that's going on and every little bolt and connection that needs to happen. So, if something needs to change because of the way it needs to go together, I can't argue about that,
No.
And honestly, for me, most of the time, especially recently, the most problems I see occurring are not the general contractor themselves, but they're subcontractors or lack of supervision of the subcontractor. Like I went out onto a job site early morning, right before slab pour, and this GC sub had nailed the vapor barrier to the ground. Gosh. I'm like, what?
What are you doing?
No, I was like, no. I'm like, yeah, I can directly blame someone for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because one thing that's really, I mean, I guess it's a double-edged sword, right? You know, we live in North Texas, so the labor force is spectacular here in terms of abundance of labor, and relatively inexpensive labor compared to, you know, other parts of the
places,
country.
Yeah.
So you would look at that and, you know, from one side of the coin and say, well, that's great. But on the flip side of the coin, there's so much development and so much construction that people are just looking for warm bodies to do a job, and maybe a lot of people aren't as skilled as they should be to do said job. So that's number one, and number two, maybe not quite as much as it was 3-4 years ago when things were just you couldn't turn a corner without seeing cranes or scaffolding or some sort of construction going on. It was so hyper competitive that this framing crew would be on this project, and they would lose half of their team because the guy across the street is paying $1.50 more an hour.
Yeah.
So they just left, and now of course I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it was like
not much.
Yeah, I mean they would, who's going to pay them a little bit more? They're going to go over here. So it was hard to keep a crew that was a well-oiled machine, as they say, together because
and the consistency
jumping ship.
Yeah, we did have some issues where I recall I can't remember which project, but we got the project bid, and then there was a delay in funding or something, and the contractor was like, "Well, I've lost my framing crew."
Yeah.
Because y'all didn't. Do you remember? Because y'all didn't. I can't remember, but y'all didn't start, so I've lost my framing crew, and now I got to,
Now I got to find.
So there was more delay because then they had to find a new framing crew.
Well, before we even started this, we were just kind of chit-chatting around the table before we started the cameras going. We were talking about a project we worked on, and it was myself with Andrew as opposed to Daniel, but it was a multifamily project in Fort Worth. I won't name it specifically, but it was a train wreck.
Oh man,
it was a effing train wreck.
I think it still is.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's done or not.
Yeah, but there was a lot of problem. A lot of problem with ownership and funding. But I think when we were supposed to, which we did we broke ground on time. Well, that doesn't matter if you don't do anything once you break ground. But all the subcontract labor they had lined up and sequenced and scheduled, it all just they went elsewhere.
Well, I think even their superintendent
they had
disappeared
a couple
or something.
I
they had to go through.
By the time I left that, because that was we started that project probably, I'm going to say maybe a year before I left Hodges.
Yeah.
Roughly, and by the time I left Hodges, they were like on their second superintendent and third project manager.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it was a mess.
You're talking about the GC.
Yes, the GC.
Yeah.
So as he was saying, he a lot of it has to do not necessarily with the GC, but the personnel that's in the field, which is the subcontractors, and if they don't know what they're doing, or if they don't perform, or if they're just lackadaisical and really don't give a darn because they're just
right, and that's where your GC's got to have better supervision.
Superintendents are important.
Yeah.
A lot of superintendents, especially in the summertime, superintendents don't want to be out in the field when it's 102.
That's right. Yeah.
They just want to be in their AC trailer and go out in the morning and go back out, at the end of the day and walk the project, but they don't.
Yeah,
they're not hands on.
Yeah,
but I think we've seen because that certain entity kind of struggled with paying their people, their subcontractors, and various other people, and then you kind of look at these other contractors that they were paying their people and they were things were happening, things were moving a lot smoother, not completely smooth, but I mean, you can definitely tell the ones that were prioritizing, making sure things were getting paid and paid on time, things were moving.
Yeah.
But that place, they definitely weren't taking care of that.
A good general contractor is kind of worth their weight in gold. However, a lot of owners just want to go with what's the lowest bid. What's the lowest bid?
But that's
it rarely works.
Yeah, sometimes us as architects have to kind of nudge them in a certain direction.
Yeah.
I've known some developers who their theory or process or whatever you want to call it is, say we'll put a project out to bid and we'll get 5 bids. We throw out the lowest and the highest, and we work with the ones in the middle. Maybe that
works.
That's reasonable.
Maybe
I don't know how many owners do that or developers do that, but I have heard of that.
Yeah.
Being a formula. But yeah, I mean, a lot of owners are worried about the bottom line, and of course you can't blame them. You're still trying to be profitable and as profitable as possible.
I think that brings up a good point about like how important kind of the bid process is in a architectural project, because we should be sitting down with the owner and these contractors and figuring out, like, okay, did they nail everything? Do they have everything in this?
I think that's
supposed to be specifying.
I think that's even farther back. You got to go is the contractual environment. I don't think the design bid build, I think, is the most inefficient way to do it. I like design assist, where you pick a contractor.
Yeah, which we did a lot together.
Like a 10% schematic, you pick a contractor, and then they help you finish the project, and then you're already done bidding by the time you're done drawing.
Yeah,
and it's right.
I saw most of that when I came in, especially when I was working with you guys. That's how almost like every one of our projects is design assist, or supposed to be design assist.
To be, yeah.
Now,
some developers are just like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, there was also issues there because the GC had in mind of like, oh, the owner's telling me this, but the architect's doing this, and there was some miscommunications going on there as well, because us as the architect, and I'm not saying it was us in general, but we would go a certain direction, and that direction wasn't necessarily always communicated to the rest of the team. I mean, it might have been in our drawings, but people had their minds set on certain things, and when it came time to build it, then there was issues.
Yeah. I've found recently, especially in the multifamily, I've actually started finding contractors that won't bid projects. Like they'll tell me, "Hey,
that's interesting."
I'll call them up and like, I got a project I want you to look at. I go, well, unless we can negotiate it, we don't want to talk about it.
No, sorry, you say general contractor?
Yeah, general
subcontractor. Okay,
yeah, general
contractor. What are they trying to negotiate?
They don't want to bid against other people. Because they know the owner's just going to come down and try to beat their price down, and then they got to go beat on their subcontractors, and they have the same subcontractors that they don't want to beat on. So they're like Spring Valley, I think, is like that now. They're like, hey, if we have to compete, we don't want it because we know we can do a good job.
Yeah, and they want to be the one and not have to keep spinning their wheels.
Yeah, because it costs them money. Yeah. It costs them money to bid a project, thousands of dollars to bid a project, and if they're just going to get beat up, for $100,000,
why do it?
$10 million project, and why?
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's. I guess it takes a while to get to that level where you can actually take that position. Say, I'm not bidding if I'm.
Yeah. You got to be as well established, and have people coming to you for work.
So theoretically, I think that's a great practice, but in the real world, that might be difficult to pull off.
I want to go back to something you said about your time at Hodges, and we talked about this internally a lot. Hodges was set up, good or bad, was set up. They had an admin staff, design staff, production staff, CA staff, contract admin.
Yep.
I always found it felt disconnected to me to have design, production, and CA as separate entities, because you can probably attest that you get a package of drawings, you got 3 days to look at it, and then go out and start building.
Correct.
So how much do you really know? So I always found it. I'd rather all be one team.
There was always talk about getting the CA guys involved earlier on in the project, and it was always talk, and everybody agreed that it was a great idea, but it never happened. Literally never happened. Yeah. So
a lot of it was the time. I mean, you guys on the CA side, this is from what I saw, is that you were bogged down by all these submittals, especially in multifamily,
Multifamily has a lot of different
like there was
moving parts.
hundreds of submittals being thrown at you,
Yeah.
and sometimes all at once.
Yeah.
And they were wanting all that stuff as quick as possible, and without a CA team, we would have been.
Well, see, and then and there's the rubs. Like, so do you pair CA and design and production, and each CA person just has fewer projects because I'm only working on the projects that my design production team went through with me. You know, I'm not working on 4 different projects from 3 different designers, you know, all at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm working on 2 projects from my same group, whatever, you know, I'm,
No,
good or bad.
That's a good point. And when I was, the last 4 or 5 years I was there, when we were doing almost exclusively, when I was doing almost exclusively multifamily with you guys.
Well, for a while, we were the only ones making any money in the office.
Yeah, the only ones.
we held the whole office up, yeah.
But to kind of add to what you were saying, that's exactly right. However, even if I was just doing CA work for multifamily, at some point you're still, if you got 3 or 4 or 5 different projects, it's still too much load.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they want you to do a little retail project over here, or do a entertainment project over here.
Yeah, just do a small theater over there while you're at it. Yeah.
Now, I never did any theaters, but I was doing those
main events and things like that.
It was round one.
Round one, it's the same thing. Yeah.
I was doing. It seems like I always had at least one of those on my table when we were doing all the multifamily work, and we were pounding out some multifamily work for a couple of years there. And on the CA side, there's a lot of moving parts in multifamily compared to shell retail, for instance, or something like that. So I mean, that's exactly right. Going back to what he said about the way the office was set up, and he said, right or wrong.
Right or wrong. I don't know if it's good or bad. Yeah.
I mean, when you're a firm of 50, 60 people, you kind of have to have departments. You can't just be if you're a small 7, 8 man firm, then you can probably do what Brandon Daniel was describing, and it's more of a collaborative, and that's great, and in fact, it's even probably the preferred way, because once you've doing CA for a while and you've got either a design or a PM background, but you've been doing CA for a while and you know how things go in the field, you can add to the design process and give them good suggestions, because hey, I've seen this and that, and maybe that detail's not going to work, but maybe go in this direction. And again, that's all theory. It's great to say that a CA guy can help the designers and the production guys when they're creating CDs and putting intricate details together. And theoretically, that's great. That's true.
Yeah.
But when you're going to the office every day and you're pounding, and of course at CA, I would say I was spending anywhere from 30 to 35% of my time out in the field, and 60, 65, 70% in the office. And so, realistically, it just wasn't going to happen. Even though we talked about it and getting the CA guys involved early on in the project, it was just never going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, it would just at that company, it would just take it would take a seismic shift, and the whole company just had to do it at one time, and so it was probably gonna never happen. I kind of thought I like to think of if the construction guys can be with the architects during the design process, it's kind of like trimming the fat they don't want off of a piece of meat, right?
It's efficiency.
We don't need that detail in the field. Why spend time drawing it? Everybody knows how to do that.
Or maybe you draw a detail that can, you can do this, but your subcontractor's gonna be
never gonna frame it like that.
Yeah, right? He's gonna freaking cuss you, out in the field. He's gonna, hell is this guy putting this detail together, man? Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
So and then and they do. A lot of times they'll take liberties and do something, that might be a little bit easier, or you use a little less material, or they look at details and say, we can't build that, or we can, but it's just
a lot of times as the architect, we don't understand that. We're like, Yeah, you can.
You can work it out on paper. Sure, you can draw a detail in your mind. And
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah. I mean,
And
technically, yes, it'll work.
And
But in the
sometimes
field,
it
it's just
is
not gonna
that
happen.
we have to kind of push certain details because it might be detrimental to what we're trying to do. And we sat down and thought through that detail to make certain things work. Now, the GC or contractor or whoever's building it might look at it from a different point of view because they're like, oh, we need to just bang this out and get it done. And in some cases, they might actually see how to build it better than what we drew it or thought
Fair
up
enough.
of
Fair
because they're the ones out there in the field every day.
And maybe they've
putting
done
this
something
stuff
similar.
together.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
And it's funny.
And sometimes we have to sit down as the architect and just be like, well, GC or contractor, how should we build this? You know?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, no, build it exactly how I drew it. Sometimes we got to take a step back and
Yeah.
Yeah, but and that's kind of like, he said trying to turn the Titanic,
Yeah.
I mean, have you guys ever had a good sized project where you brought the contractors in to help work out details? Never.
no,
I haven't. Maybe you guys have.
not really. I mean, there might have been one or two times we
There's been
sat down at the
a few
table.
details we've probably gone over, yeah, but it's always post design. It's always already during construction.
Well, it's usually-
we need to redo this detail.
It's usually the kickoff meeting.
And a lot of it's costs a lot of times. It's
a
like-
lot of it's cost.
But at
Cost
the
of
same
it,
time, a lot of it is the GC didn't look at the detail.
yeah. Sometimes.
And they didn't realize that, oh, you've got this piece of steel in there or this piece of something in there, and that's going to add cost to this project that we didn't allot for. And then now it's like, oh, we got to sit down and rethink
And
this.
that might cost a GC $25,000 or $250,000 by the
Yeah.
time the project's done.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And GCs have to take a big ass set of multifamily, set of drawings, and review them and get a bid out in 2 weeks or
Yeah.
by a deadline.
It's a
They're
lot.
not going to look at every single. They
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah, they do by industry. Oh, it's multifamily. Okay, so I'm going to
Yeah.
bid Romex. I'm going to bid this, and regardless of what was actually drawn. Yeah. they
And
don't
a lot
take
of
the time
times
to look at it,
that's probably that might be on the owner or the architect not communicating that, hey, we're at this level and you guys are thinking this level. And sometimes I think that's a lot of times what happened, especially one of our projects up in Denton where, they wanted this level and the GC was like, well,
You can't afford
we
that.
can't do that. You're only at this level, but they still wanted this level.
We're talking about the project with that married couple as the clients.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, we wanted to get them, and the GC wanted to get them a good project. All at the same time. Everybody wanted a good project, but it was just
Man, that project had a lot going for it and a lot work pulling against it.
It
yeah.
ended up turning
It
out
looks
pretty good.
I've never
It-
been inside it since it was finished. I need to go up
It
there.
looks like a pretty nice project, and it still looks good, and everybody seems to be happy with it. But
I want to shift gears a little bit. Omar, since all three of us have left our former employer, you've been doing other work on your own, and you've
Correct.
been taking a break, and now you're working on building your own house, correct?
That is correct.
Can you talk to us about how your experiences as CA is affecting your thought process? Like, did you put something on paper and go, wait a minute, I can't afford that detail, or
Well, it's funny you say that. So after I left Hodges, I went to work for a firm, actually very geographically close to Hodges, and I was there for about 2 years, and we did primarily, I call it industrial, but warehouses and kind of factory work. But I'd say 90% of the jobs we did were large warehouse projects, anywhere from 150,000 square feet to 1,000,000 square feet. All tilt panel, just overhead door after overhead door. I mean,
yeah.
50 100 doors on one side of the building, and then the other side is the exact same mirror, 100, or 50 or whatever, overhead doors, and they got a little office component when you walk in the front corner. It was pretty generic work, but it was big. A lot of concrete and a lot of steel. Anyhow, I spent a couple of years there, and so my wife and I, we bought a property down in the south part of DFW, close to one of the lakes. Not on the lake, but in a lake community, and it's a little under an acre and a half. We wanted to get in a subdivision that had a little bit bigger lots, a little more space. Obviously we knew that it was going to be a little bit more of a commute anywhere, compared to where we are now. So anyway, we bought this property in the fall of 23. And so, obviously to build a house on it. So at the end of 23, beginning of 24, I parted ways with the firm I won't name them, I was with. And, my wife and I sat down and we figured that, let me take a quarter step back. I've always had this desire to not only design my own house, but literally build my own house.
Yeah, like most architects. Probably.
Yeah, exactly right. And by build, I don't mean being my own GC. I mean, I want to physically get my hands dirty and do some trade work and help build this thing. Now, of course, I can't do it myself, and we're not being unrealistic here. But the thought was that I explained that to my wife. I've always wanted to do this, and she said, "Well, you should do it." And luckily, my wife does, pretty well financially. So, we agreed that 2024, I would focus my efforts on designing and building this house. And so, and obviously there was a monetary component. If we don't hire a GC, and the average GC on a nice custom home they're gonna try to make about a 15% margin. So let's just use easy numbers. Let's just say if it's $1 million house, that's $150,000, or a $500,000 house, you're talking $75,000 that you don't have to pay to a GC if you do the GC work yourself. And then on top of that, if I'm self-performing some of the trades with some helpers, obviously save some costs, but at the same time, I'm getting to do my desired, physically building the house, right? So that was how we approached it. And so never having done this before, and when we approached this, maybe a good segue into spending 60 seconds on the financing aspect of this. So we had to obviously get a construction loan. And so not every bank does construction loans. There are plenty that do. And we were talking to one, and since I'm not hiring, this is another challenge that we didn't foresee. Since we were acting as our own builder and not hiring a contractor or a home builder, we had to, and we were not a bona fide licensed contractor of any sort. We were, my wife is in the healthcare industry, and of course I'm in the architectural practice. They said, well, since you're not a builder or a contractor, in order to get a loan through us and do your owner, they call it owner build. That's what they call it in the industry. Yeah. If you want to do an owner build, we require you to use a consultant, and a consultant is someone who has residential construction background. Yeah. And you work with them. You give them your drawings. They go through them for a fee, of course. They go through them and they, they make suggestions. But at the end of the day, they put they review they review your plans. They use their formula, which is it's a little bit frustrating because they're supposed to be, some level of experts, and I'm sure they are. I'm not trying to bash them or anything like that. But at the end of the day, they kind of just say, okay, you've got an X amount of square foot house, and their formula says that the going rate for residential construction is this. So, they just do a math problem. Yeah. You got 3,000 square feet at $150 a square foot is this. And we're like, well, you're supposed to be the expert and really pouring through but at the end of the day, just use a formula based on square footage and the cost to build. was like, well, that's kind of frustrating. So anyway, my point is they make you use a consultant, and they had a relationship with 3 different consultants. They gave us a little bit of a briefing on all 3 of them. We selected one, and we've been working with him, and he's a good guy. So the first design I did for the house, I turned it over to the construction, and I turned it over to the consultant, and I don't know, a couple weeks later he came back to me, and I'm sure on the other side of the phone he was, internally laughing at me. He's like, "Dude, you cannot build this house," because he knew what we were pre-approved for a certain dollar amount for the construction loan. And let's just use these easy numbers. So let's just say it was $500,000. He looked at the plans and was like, "No, you're not going to build this for $500,000, dude. You need to go back to the drawing board. It's too big. It's too much finish out. It's, you're going to have to scale back." And so that was I guess that was the first time I tried doing this. I got rejected to half court, as they say. So it was frustrating because, again, my quote unquote job for 2024 was to design and build this house. Yeah. And ideally, we wanted to start construction like maybe early summer, late spring, early summer. Did the whole design, put a lot of work into it, and said, "No, this is too much square footage." Again, because he was just kind of using a formula. And so I had to basically scrap it and start over again and do a whole new design, which I did. And then had to even tweak that a little bit. And so I've got we'll call the first design 1, and that just kind of went away. Yeah. I did design 2, and then design 2B, which was the tweak of design 2 to, cut a little bit more square footage out, a little bit more, level of finish out, and to bring the dollar signs down. And so anyway, that's where we're at now. The consultant has reviewed it. He put a budget together, and he knew to some degree that I wanted to do some of the work myself. And so he put a budget together, which, again, I'm not going to name any names, but I saw his budget, and man, it's like maybe I ought to change professions because this guy's getting paid to put this is crap, you know? And so I put my own budget together. Because of course he sent me his budget with the idea that, hey, okay, I know you want to self-perform some stuff, put your budget together using mine as a go-by and kind of see where we might save some cost. So I did my own budget, and long story short, his budget was this, mine was this, and it was reasonable. I mean, after I subtracted all the stuff that I thought I could, self-perform with labor, and I've got some being in CA for 10 years, you make friends with a lot of general contractors. Yeah. And they're always they're always willing to offer help. Hey, if you need a good sub, I can do this, or hey, I can get you this at cost, at my cost, and so I do take and intend to take advantage of all those benefits from doing CA. Anyhow, so I put my budget together probably a couple weeks ago. This past week, I sent my budget and plans to the bank. So they're reviewing it, and we might be at if there's 10 stairs to get to the landing, we might be at stair 9. Oh no! So we're right there.
Right there, yeah.
I think this thing can be built for the amount of money that we were pre-approved for a construction loan. So that's where we're at. We have done a couple of soft costs on the property. We got a topo done, topo with trees. We got a soils report done, or geotech report, however you want to call it. Yeah. We had some tree removal surface done. We're going to have to build a retaining wall, which will probably, we got a pretty good number from, I think I took 6 bids from 6 different subs to do the retaining wall work. I think we want to use a natural stone wall as opposed to a block wall.
Like a gravity wall.
Exactly,
like a gravity
right.
Stone wall.
Okay. Yeah, so our retaining wall is going to be we've got about 6 feet of fall from the finished floor elevation of where the house is to where the bottom of the backyard will be. And we thought about doing like a tiered, like you were talking about earlier, out of out of block, going up about 3 feet and then going back about 3-4 feet, then up another 3 feet to get us to 6 feet. Reason being, there's two reasons. Number one, where we're at, I can't recall if it's a property owners association requirement or a city requirement. It might be city. Any retaining wall above 4 feet has to be engineered. So we don't have a 6 foot wall. We have 2 3 foot walls. Okay, so we don't have a 4 foot wall. So we can skirt that, and also doing a tier gives you a nice opportunity to do some real nice landscaping. And make it look real nice. And we saw some images, and we visited some properties that had that tiered kind of retaining wall. Looks really nice. But the only problem is if we can do that at a block, if we try to do that at a natural stone wall, it's just we don't have enough physical room from the front edge of the retaining wall to the back edge of
because it takes a lot of depth.
Correct. Exactly correct. So we either going to do a block wall that's got the tiers or the stone wall 6 feet high. Now the company we talked to, they have in-house engineering, so they could do they could stamp a set of drawings for us. And so as soon as we know we're going to get approved for the construction loan, closing the whole process takes about a month, which I have no idea why it takes that long, but it does. But once we kind of at least get the verbal, hey, yeah, you guys are good to go, we're probably going to pull the trigger on getting the retaining wall under construction. So at the time that is kind of completed, we're funded for the construction loan, and then we can just kind of go, right from there.
Yeah.
We'll probably do some grading work initially, bring in some dirt a little bit, and then in short order start doing foundation work, and then go from there.
Is the retaining wall going to have any? Does it have any impact on the foundation of the house? Is it close enough that?
No, it's far enough out. I'm going off of memory.
Load on it. It's all just hydrostatic load.
Yeah, I think we're about 10, 12 feet from the back side of the retaining wall to the edge of the covered patio.
Oh, okay.
And the patio, let's say, is 10 or 12 feet from the actual, wall of the exterior wall of the house. Oh, okay. Yeah. So
you got yeah.
Now, of course, we've got it's North Texas, so soils are not great. So we're going to have to do the geotech report. Recommended. Of course, they don't tell you what to do. They recommend. Yeah. And of course, they're not liable for anything, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's
Mother
insane.
Nature is Mother Nature.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, we had a couple options. We could do a pier and beam.
Pier and beam. Yeah.
We could do a post tension, or we could do a structural slab. Yeah. And we got with one of my friends who's a general contractor, and kind of bounce it off of him. And the most economical route would be to do the post tension. We're gonna have to do some moisture conditioning, which is kind of I never thought I'd be doing that on a residential property. We got to excavate 5 feet, go back, and I think 8 or 10 inch lifts. Saturate it, compact it. Yeah. And I think we're going to go ahead and do a 12-inch select fill cap. Oh, wow, yeah. And then we'll do the post-tension slab on top of that.
Well, it's worth doing all that, especially for your own home. I mean, it's worth doing that for any house. But if you're building a track home, you're never going to recoup that cost. Right. So yeah.
But foundation is important, man. That's
the house. We've been talking about this house that we're.
So Omar is working with us, or going to be working with us on Distilled homes, and the first house that we're working on is this Cliffbrook house, which we're introducing. We either introduced that in the last episode, but Omar will be working with us on the construction side, mainly as kind of our project manager or superintendent in a lot of ways. And he's helping us with this whole budget thing and bid process. So
and we've decided we're going to go with, because we have bedrock, we have bearing soils shallow enough. We're going to go with pier and beam on that house.
So this project right now, it's showing it like 6 to 8 feet down is bedrock. So
we talked about that, and we kind of,
it's pretty shallow.
So that's great news. Yeah. Out where I was building, I think bedrock was, well, put it this way, they drilled, when they came out into the geotech report, they did 2 borings, and they went down 25 feet didn't hit rock.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Yeah.
So wow.
And
Yeah,
so we
piers
were
would be out of the question.
yeah, they went off, so since we don't know, because per contract we agreed they were going to drill 25 feet. Didn't hit, luckily didn't hit water, but didn't hit bedrock. So we were talking about, I think I looked at our design. Of course, this was the first design, so it was a little different, but we were talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 35 to 45 foot. I'm sorry, 35 to 45 piers. I think 16 belled piers, because we're not going to rock.
Yeah.
I think 16 feet deep.
Damn.
And so I was like, that's going to blow our budget right there.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
out of the question.
Yeah, it appears alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, so the fact when they told me that that they were considering, because again, we've got options, but they told me they hit rock at 4 to 6, 8 feet. I was like, well, that's great.
Yeah.
Because
this
I think
project's going to be a lot easier.
Yeah,
on the foundation wise to choose the pier and beam.
Yeah.
this project is going to be how you want to. The finished product is going to be top shelf.
Yeah.
So
High-end,
something of that caliber doesn't need to, but
Yeah,
I think it's worth having a
In a lot of
PRB
ways,
foundation.
we lucked out a lot.
Yeah.
How deep those piers
Yeah, yeah.
need to be, because if you're going down 20, 30 feet, that's not cheap.
In the world of pier and beam, 5, 6 feet, that's nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a lot easier to choose that route.
Yeah. How long have we been going?
Not sure, but
I just wanted to ask one more question of Omar about the house you're building for yourself. Are you making a high performance envelope to reduce your HVAC and eventual electric costs, or are you doing more conventional envelope design?
Probably somewhere in between. Honestly, we don't have the budget to do a really, really high efficient house like we're doing together.
Yeah.
That you guys are designing for the Cliffbrook home. But at the same time, it's not just generic builder grade stuff either. It's somewhere in the middle. I designed the house, and this is kind of a I don't know if benefit's the right word, but having a good design background, having a good construction background, having a good CA background, and knowing what we like, I was able, and of course, in the back of my mind, I always knew that I was going to some level, be self-performing some of the construction here. So I intentionally designed this house to make it, I'll air quote easy, to make it easy to build. It's going to be, we really like the kind of Tuscany old world look, so it's going to be, kind of along that style. But in terms of, it's a very easy, like roof, for instance. It's a nice tile roof, but it's a 4 and 12 pitch. It's got a gable,
Pretty standard stuff.
a center ridge, a ridge beam and gables. It's got one, L shape. The garage is kind of a straight. It's very simple to build. There's no real intricate, corners where you got a bunch of different angles coming together. There's no curves. It's going to be spacious, but it's all going to be nice, tight right angles. Fur downs and vaulted ceilings maybe. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be difficult to build from a framing standpoint or any other standpoint for that matter. So yeah, having at least a firm grip of how things go together, and knowing that I was going to do some of the construction myself with help, I was able to design something that I think is going to be pretty, again, air quote, easy to build. And going back to his initial question, no, it's not going to be uber high efficiency, but we want to try to find somewhere in between where we can build this with our modest budget, decently modest budget, and
that's where we probably need to sit down together and maybe help you out with that. Just because, with Distilled Homes, that's where we're wanting to go eventually. Yeah, we have this high-end home that we're going to be building together, but Distilled Homes, we're wanting to do it on a much better, lower budget.
High performance homes at a reasonable budget.
And
That's our goal, yeah.
And it can be done. I don't know if high performance is what the right word. I don't know. Maybe for what we're going for. Now, yeah, we're trying to go for a certain level, but maybe not.
I say high performance in, in relation to what everybody else is building.
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
I mean,
like my house,
probably
the
do
house
that.
I just bought was built in 2019, and it's not high performance in any regard. I mean, yeah, it's got a little thin layer continuous insulation on the outside,
I mean, there's
but
stuff
it's not
that
airtight.
we
It's
can
not,
do outside of, like, we're not going to build this house out of cardboard.
Yeah.
Like most of these builders are
Exactly,
doing. And
yeah,
we're not going
yeah.
to name names or anything, but
Well, you can name any of them.
yeah, I mean, a lot of them are building, out of this crazy cardboard stuff.
Yeah.
That, I mean, you could literally just barely even try to punch through it, and you'd go right through it.
Well, and that's again, even the trades that I'll have nothing to do with, foundation work, masonry, things of this nature. I still intend to be on site pretty much
All the time.
pretty much every day. Maybe not, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., but, I'll be there pretty much every day, or at least 3, 4, 5 days a week, to make sure that the quality control is there.
I was watching a podcast, YouTube thing. I think it was probably Matt Reisinger. He was interviewing someone that was building a house.
Yeah.
And to what you were just saying, he made perfect. He said, framers especially, they go so fast that if you're not there, by the time you get there, they've already finished something wrong.
Yeah.
I like that.
So you have to be there and catch them before they do it. To make sure, no, we don't want it like this.
Yeah.
Some framing crews that have 7, 8, 9, 10-man crews, they can
They'll build your
pound it
house in
out.
2 days.
I mean, they are in and out.
Multifamily.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, multifamily.
They built a whole 2-3 levels in
Yeah.
a day. It seemed like.
Yep.
Yeah,
And that's how they make. They got to
moving.
crank out product to make a profit. So they're not going to sit there and be real concerned about the level of quality. They're going to do something that's going to pass inspection, certainly.
Yeah.
But that's about all you're going to get when you got volume builders like that. So
Yeah. But what I was getting at is, like, sometimes it's just merely just a decision on your exterior sheathing. I mean, sometimes, like, you start there and you can surprisingly get to a level like a
you can
not
get to a
high
level of
efficiency
performance
yet,
without anything
but-
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
you really
it's all
can.
just in the details.
It's just. Yeah, so that would be our goal with Distilled Homes, is to build high performance, maybe higher performing homes. So that people don't have to. We can reduce our HVAC load enough that you can not only afford to buy the house but pay the electric bill.
Yeah.
which is a problem, right? I mean, you buy an older home, especially, you're gonna have $400 electric bill. Like, well,
if you're going to build a product like we're going to build, I mean, for that kind of price tag, it better be pretty slick.
Yeah.
It's got to be I don't know if a smart house is.
well, I don't know about the technology we're gonna put in it yet, but not the digital
That's
technology,
something that we'll
the envelope technology we're gonna use is.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it's going to have some nice lighting and some, wireless
Forget about it.
this
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
there's,
That stuff's
nowadays
come a long ways even today.
tremendous.
I actually
10 years
found I
from-
sent something to Andrew not too long ago. It was a new track lighting product that a vendor I met. It's track lighting, but it's just a smooth bar flush with the sheetrock, and your lights just magnet just anywhere. You just put a magnet light anywhere on it,
That's interesting.
and it's just flush with the sheetrock. You can see it, but you can use that. You can design the
But it's
pattern,
flush
and you can just stick your light wherever the hell you want to put it.
Yeah, lighting is coming. Lighting has come so far in the last 20
Well, when
years.
you got LEDs now, they're LEDs, so they don't require line voltage anymore necessarily. They get it, but
Yeah, some of it some of the lighting you can do off low voltage, almost
yeah,
now.
yeah.
So it's.
I mean, look at
pretty
your
amazing.
computer over there. I mean, it's all low voltage lighting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing what you can do.
But the cost of lighting in today's industry is
Oh.
insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
A lot of
Yeah.
that has to do with, like, just, I think, that industry.
Yeah.
And that could be a whole nother conversation
Yeah.
about.
Oh shit!
They
Yeah,
gotta
that
be making
industry.
some margins in that industry. My
I
goodness.
was looking at lights last night for this Cliffbrook house, and yeah, I mean, just one light fixture, $3,000.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, I've actually in my house. Mine's a track home, lighting is terrible in it. Like a bedroom's got a fan with a light in it. That's it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I've been going through and upgrading all the bulbs I can with Govee smart bulbs. And I'm blown away with how easy it is to just leave the light switch on. And you can set up scenes and whole rooms and just you can tell Alexa to, hey, turn off the lights in the office, and she does it. You don't have to worry about it. And it was a freaking $5 bulb.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Anyways, like one of the kind of our closing question would be, so we kind of talked to you about this the other day, was architecture doesn't start with an architect and it doesn't end with an architect. So do you agree with that? And
what are your thoughts on
what
that
were your
kind
thoughts
of statement?
on that
No,
statement?
I never thought of it that way until you guys, threw that quote out there, and I was like, well, that's interesting. I mean, let me think about that for a second. But no, I think that's absolutely right. I think we are certainly an important part of the process, but we're just one of the parts of the equation, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
An important one, obviously, but I like to think we're important.
I like the contractor probably thinks we're less important.
Yeah, but no, that's exactly true. So we, when we go into a project, I think we always have to keep that in mind. But yeah, that's interesting. I never heard anybody, kind of put it in those terms. But I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. You think about even back to school. Your professor in architecture class and design class didn't just say, "Go make me something." And even if he did, that's the beginning of your architecture. It wasn't you.
Yeah.
And our clients, they generally, unless you're the architect and you're the client and you're the builder, like at your home, that's the only time architecture starts and ends with the architect. And it doesn't even end with the architect for you because your wife's not an architect and she's going to be the boss, right? So.
Yeah.
No, we at some point we need to have maybe a different episode. We have to talk about design school and different schools and how they approach the architectural degree program and whether that's really conducive to what you're going to see once you get out of school and get your first job in the
That'd be
professional world.
Yeah. We need to find some people who are just coming out of school. Yeah. And come on up.
We've been
All
out of
three
school
of us
for a
came
while.
from different schools, though, too.
Yeah. Well, Omar and I are about the same age.
I went to Bowling Green. You went to
Texas A&M, right?
Yeah, I went to Texas A&M
at first, but you also did UTA, right?
I also did UTA. Yeah.
And then
I started
you
at
did
Colorado
primarily
State,
UTA.
and then now this is all undergrad. I started at Colorado State, and then when I moved to DFW, I went to UT Arlington, and that's where I graduated from.
So you have two different school experiences.
And I got my undergraduate from A&M and my master's from UTA. Yeah.
So we know some of the same professors, and I graduated.
Todd Hamilton, I love that guy.
Yeah,
love
me too.
that
He's
guy.
a great guy. I took several classes. I think 2 studios and an elective with him.
Yeah, I can't.
Construction drawings.
He actually hired me for my first job.
No shit.
My second job out of college was through him.
Really? Yeah, he's a great dude.
Nice. Yeah.
Is he still?
I don't know. I
practicing
haven't
there?
talked to Todd in years.
I know
I
he
don't
always
know
had.
if he's still alive, man. He's crazy.
Yeah.
So he might not be.
He always had some high side hustle going on. He was always doing residential additions or remodels.
Yeah.
Always in the Park Cities. That was kind of
Because that's where he lived.
his niche.
Yeah. He lived over off of Armstrong, I think it was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Good. But yeah, I mean, he was. Let's see. I graduated in '95. God damn, that's 30 years ago. And he was probably in his 50s. He may not be with us anymore. I don't know.
I don't really. I need to go find out. 'Cause
But he was my favorite professor. I had a guy had good experiences at UTA, but I don't know that UTA the way they did because they pride themselves on being a design school, and they're good at it, right? And that's how they, I guess that's how they prepare their curriculum, to kind of facilitate that ideal they have of being a top-notch design school. Is that the best way to get people, your students who are going to be graduating soon, to go out and get a job in the real world? You know?
Yeah.
Now again, this is 30 years ago, so they may have changed course. I have no idea.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Who knows
that's a
is.
good idea to get some newer,
Maybe even get a student
greener
in here,
folks
like,
in here to
what they're going
talk
through.
about it. Yeah.
Well, anyways, thank you, Omar, for
thanks, Omar.
coming
No, I enjoyed
on
it.
with us.
I'm
And,
sure we'll do this again.
I think we had some pretty good conversations about construction administration, construction itself, even dove into some loan stuff there. But yeah,
And
thank
who
you
knows,
for coming on.
Hopefully before too long we can start breaking ground on this Cliffbrook home, and and we can start sharing, maybe some videos or images of actual work being done in the field.
Yeah.
That'll be pretty exciting. I'm excited about the future of
Yeah.
this. And
Especially someone like, I'm guessing you guys both collaborate on the design of this.
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's great to see the stuff that comes from your mind onto paper. Well, not paper, I guess, on the computer.
yeah,
On the screen.
But we'll call it paper, and then see it being built.
Yeah.
And then when it's done, you walk away. It's like, wow, this is, that's one thing I've always loved about the architectural profession.
Yeah.
Things you when it's all said and done, what you had in your mind, is now a finished product. And it's kind of cool.
then hopefully everybody has a good reaction towards it. That's
And
another
hopefully
big
it'll be
thing.
there for 30, 40 years.
Yeah. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks,
I think
Omar.
this is
Yeah.
the end of our third episode here at Architecture Distilled. Make sure you like and subscribe to our podcast, and also thank you to, I guess,
Ebarb
Guest Architecture and Left Brain Studios for sponsoring these episodes right now. And thank you.
Thank you.